Hello YouTube, welcome back to my channel. My name is Tyler Wilson. Today I'm going to present you with my top 7 travel tips for going to Venice. Tip number 1 is you are going to get lost and you should definitely embrace it. There's no avoiding it in Venice. It's a confusing labyrinth of narrow walkways, tall buildings, and canals that just sort of snake and go all over the place, and it's nearly impossible to be able to see where you're going at any given time. Using your phone for Google Maps doesn't really help because the buildings are so tall that they block out any GPS or cellular signal that you usually have. The better thing for you to do is to try to pick out a tall building in the direction that you know you need to go and keep heading towards that, because not every walkway just continues on straight to where you can continue to walk towards that direction. You may need to make a left or a right turn to then continue straight afterwards. So if you can see a tall building off in the distance, it's much better to keep walking towards that than it is to try to use a GPS to know, okay, I'm gonna turn right here, I'm gonna turn left here. It just doesn't work that way. But just know that you will get lost and don't panic. The other part of this tip is to, when you are trying to find your way around, try to find out as soon as you get in which Vaporetto stop is the closest to your hotel or wherever you're trying to go. Because the locals, if you do ask them how to get to where you're going, they're much more likely to know the Vaporetto stops than they are to know, I'm going to Hotel El Campano. They won't know where that is. What they will know is, I am going to the San Toma Vaporetto stop, and they can direct you there. So it's a lot easier to use the Vaporetto stops as landmarks. Tip number 2 for traveling to Venice is to take the buses that are available from the Marco Polo airport onto the island of Venice. These buses will wait for you right outside the arrival terminal. They'll wait for you right outside the arrivals terminal, and they'll take you right onto the island to Piazza Roma, which is the main sort of parking lot when you arrive. There's only one spot on the island where cars and buses and things like that can actually get to, and that is Piazza Roma. And they will drop you there, and you can take either a water taxi or Vaporetto or walk to wherever you happen to be going from there. So definitely check them out. Britt and I pre-booked ours, and we went on Expedia and got a really good deal. We paid only $46 Canadian for our round trip tickets, which is really good. I mean, they picked us up from the airport, drove us across the bridge onto the island, and then when we needed to go back to the airport to pick up a rental car, they picked us up from the island and brought us back as well. So $46 Canadian is a really good deal for that. Now, the other good thing about these buses is that they are air conditioned and they have Wi-Fi. Now, after waiting through the Marco Polo airport arrivals, you are definitely gonna want that air conditioning, believe me. It is so hot in there, at least when we were there in May of 2018. It was so hot and the line was so long to get through the airport in Venice that when we got on the bus and the air conditioning started blasting, it was like heaven. So you definitely wanna check out these buses. Tip number 3 is about gelato. It's how to pick real gelato from the fake gelato. Now, there's a lot of fake gelato in Venice and in Italy in general, which is mass produced. It uses a lot of artificial flavors and colors. So what you want to do is you want to look for authentic, good gelato. And the way that you do that is you look for a gelato that is dense, that sits low in its container. You know, it's not piled high. And you'll know what I mean when you're actually in Italy. You'll see gelato everywhere that is piled high out of its container. You know, the metal container or plastic container will stop here, and there will be a mountain of gelato on top of it sticking out. Now, real gelato, you know, is made differently from the ice cream that we have here in North America and all over the world. It's much more dense, there's less air involved, there's a lot more flavor packed into it, and that's why people love gelato so much, because it's much more creamy that way. But fake gelato, they use a lot of artificial flavors and colors, and it just isn't the same. It doesn't have the same quality, it doesn't taste as good. So you want to avoid the fake gelato at all costs. Just make sure that you're getting some good gelato if that's what you're there for, because not only is the piled up gelato not real, but it can actually be, you know, outside of health code rules from being piled up out of its container. It can get contaminated, it's not being kept at the right temperature because it's outside of the container. It's just a whole mess. You want to make sure that you're having good, artisanal, proper Italian gelato while you're there. Tip number 4 is to do the gondola ride. Now, I might be biased because, as some of you might know that watched my previous Venice video, I got engaged on our gondola ride when we were in Venice, but I promise that's not the only reason I enjoyed it. Gondola rides are so much fun because they're not only a way to get to see the city from the canals, but you learn a lot more. I mean, your gondolier, they know the city like nobody else. While you're going down the canal, you get to see all these different houses and different sides of the houses that you don't get to see from the walking paths. On the back of every property that faces the canal, there's these grand entrances that they used to use for the storehouses for when they used to offload all of their products and wine and things like that. And they still use them today for the most part, but on the older buildings, they're much bigger grand entrances, and you get to see them up close and personal from your gondola. Not only that, but like I said, the gondoliers know the city better than anybody else, and they'll point things out to you and show you things, and you'll end up learning something along the way versus just walking around by yourself all day. Our gondola ride actually went right past Marco Polo's house, which was very cool, and our gondolier made sure that we had a very good view of it. He told us about it, told us a bit of the history since Marco Polo has lived there, and it was just something totally unique that we wouldn't have gotten from just walking around the city. Now, I've heard a lot of people say that the gondolas in Venice are overpriced and they're not really worth the price that you pay for them, but I honestly beg to differ. I think that it was a very good experience for Britt and I would definitely do it again if I had to do our Venice trip over, or if I ever go back, I would probably still do it. If you have the budget for the gondola ride, definitely do it. Tip number 5 is to plan the timing of your trip to Venice. If you're the kind of person that can have your whole trip ruined by not having the perfect view of a site or not being able to get your own perfect picture of something, then you should avoid some times in Venice. You should avoid from late fall to early spring, because during those times you can get what's called acqua alta, or high water, which is essentially just flooding. I mean, especially around San Marco, the St. Mark's Square and all of the areas around there, it can actually flood during certain times of year. So they will put down walkways for you to walk on, so you're not totally out of luck while you're there. But if you're the kind of person that doesn't want to deal with that, or you don't want to have your perfect pictures ruined by these ugly metal walkways that they have all over the place, maybe consider visiting during the summer. On the flip side of that though, when there may be acqua alta, it is actually some of the cheapest times to visit Venice. So if you're being budget conscious about your trip, maybe visit in late fall and early spring, because not only is there less people, there's less people because they don't want to deal with the high water. If you don't mind a little bit of water, just go during those times and you might actually save a little bit of money. Tip number 6 is to learn as much Italian as you can and utilize it while you're there. This goes without saying, but people prefer to talk to people in their native tongue. I prefer to speak to people in English. I know a little bit of French and now a little bit of Italian, but I would much rather speak to people in English. It's where I'm comfortable, it's what I know, it's what I'm familiar with. Italian is a fairly easy language to pick up simply by being around it. I mean, I researched a little bit before we left. I researched the hell out of Italians and Italian culture and what they consider to be rude, and I found that it can actually be considered rude to just approach somebody at a store or on the street and just start speaking English to them and assuming that they'll know what you're talking about. Not only will you probably be wrong, because the majority of Italians don't really speak English, but it's just pretty rude. I mean, they don't necessarily know what language you speak when you walk up to them. So if these people do speak English, you're going to confuse them and they're not going to catch what you're saying at first because they're not going to understand you. A lot of the tourism-based professions, waiters and things like that, they will speak English and they'll definitely try to help you. But even then, you should try to speak as much Italian to them as you can. Britt and I found that when we spoke even just the tiniest bit of Italian to people, like, we don't know a lot. Really just we know how to say please, thank you so much, all of these kinds of things. It just made them warm up to us so much more. You're visiting their city in their country. It's on you to learn their language if you want to have a good time and be able to interact with the locals. My 7th and final tip for today is to just explore and have fun. Britt and I really didn't pre-plan a lot of our trip in Venice. The only thing we really knew that we were doing was to go on a gondola ride, because it's something that Britt has always wanted to do with her life. The majority of our activities while we were there were planned on the fly, and it was something that we just had a lot of fun with. I mean, we ended up going to the Leonardo da Vinci Museum and the Campanile di San Marco, which is essentially a big tower that overlooks the St. Mark's Square and the Basilica there, and it was amazing. We didn't plan these things out. These are just things we were walking around, we saw signs for, and actually saw the buildings. The tower, Britt was just walking through the square and she was like, wow, that tower is awesome. we got to get to the top of it. So we got in line, and sure enough, we went right up to the top and we were able to see the whole island. It was incredible, and it was something that we completely had no idea that existed before we went, and we are so glad we did because it's one of our most treasured memories of being there. There's so many small shops and small things to do in Venice that you don't know are there until you actually get there. And it is a bit of a shame if you go there and only do the big tourist attraction stuff like Basilica San Marco and Doge's Palace. Although those places are amazing and you should definitely go, take some time to just explore and find the small things on your own, because you definitely will not regret it. I am going to hit you guys with a bonus tip today, and that bonus tip is to download the Get Your Guide app, or at least visit their website. This platform is amazing for being able to get last minute tickets, skip the line tickets, just generally tickets to anything. While we were away, we used this app so much and it worked out so well. Britt and I had absolutely zero plans to visit Doge's Palace, and while we were walking around, we passed it 2 or 3 times and said, man, this place looks awesome, we really got to get in. So we pulled out our phones, we turned on our data because we were being conscious, and we got into the app and we bought our skip the line tickets, and we were in the building within 10 or 15 minutes from deciding that we wanted to go. It took no effort, all the payments done, and you can use the digital app to get in. It just makes your trip so much easier if you're planning on the fly. So definitely go check out the Get Your Guide app, and again, website if you want. I left a link in the description for tickets to Doge's Palace. You can go on and check out their website if you want. So those are my 7 tips for visiting Venice. Thank you so much for stopping by today and checking out my channel. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up down below. Hit that subscribe button and click on the bell to make sure you get notifications when I release future videos like this one. I'm going to be doing a whole series on travel tips and travel videos from our 2-week trip to Europe earlier this summer. We went to not only Venice, but we also went to Rome, Santorini, and Athens, so I will be releasing videos on all of those places as well. So just make sure that you're coming along for the ride with me. Thank you so much.